My wife yelled at dinner, "I hate your family. They're toxic and I want a divorce." My parents were sitting there. I answered, "All right, let's begin now." Then I put my lawyer on speakerphone and started the filing process as she just sat there. When she saw I wasn't going to beg or argue and the lawyer said I can have the papers ready by Monday, the words hit me like a physical blow. I hate your family, and I want a divorce. My wife screamed them across the dinner table, and in that instant, everything I thought I knew about my life vanished. The smell of pot roast and gravy still hung heavy in the air, but all I could hear was the ringing silence that followed, everyone frozen in disbelief. I'm Ethan, 32, and I'd been married to Olivia for 5 years. Honestly, the cracks started showing around year 3. She always had this thing about my family, little comments here and there, but I figured that was just normal, right? Everyone complains about their in-laws sometimes. Except Olivia wasn't just complaining about in-laws. She was complaining about my own parents, Sarah and David, and it was getting worse. Sarah would call to check in, and Olivia would roll her eyes. David would send a birthday card, and she'd make some snide remark about them being too involved. I kept brushing it off because I loved her. I thought maybe she just needed space, that she'd warm up to them eventually. Spoiler alert, she didn't. Here's the thing, my parents aren't toxic. They're not overbearing. They don't show up unannounced or criticize Olivia. They live a few states over and visit maybe twice a year. That's it. But according to Olivia, they were the root of all our problems. Which confused me, because our problems seemed to be more about her anger issues than anything Sarah and David ever did. She'd blow up over small things, then somehow circle back to blaming my family for her stress. I should have seen the pattern, but when you're in it, you make excuses. You tell yourself it'll get better. So, when Sarah and David called, saying they'd be driving through Phoenix and wanted to stop by for dinner, I said sure without thinking twice. Olivia wasn't thrilled, but she agreed. She said she'd make her famous pot roast, which, looking back, should have been my first red flag. She only cooked elaborate meals when she was planning something. I helped set the table, opened a bottle of wine, tried to make everything perfect. My parents arrived around 6. Hugs all around. David brought flowers for Olivia. Sarah had baked cookies. Just normal family stuff. We sat down to eat and everything seemed fine at first. David talked about their road trip, Sarah asked about our Thanksgiving plans. Standard dinner conversation, but I noticed Olivia was quiet, just pushing food around her plate, giving short answers. I tried to catch her eye, but she wouldn't look at me. Sarah must have noticed, too, because she asked if everything was okay, if the roast turned out all right. That's when Olivia's fork clattered onto her plate. The sound was so loud in our small dining room that we all stopped talking. She looked up, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before, a cold rage that made my stomach drop. David tried to lighten the mood, made some joke about his own cooking, but Olivia cut him off. Her voice was shaking when she started speaking, and I immediately knew this was going to be bad. She said everything was not okay, that she was tired of pretending, tired of these fake family dinners, tired of acting like she enjoyed having my parents in her life. Sarah's face went pale. David froze with his wine glass halfway to his mouth. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but Olivia wasn't done. She stood up from the table, her chair scraping against the floor, and that's when she really let loose. She screamed that she hated my family, that they were toxic and suffocating, and she couldn't do this anymore. And then came the words that changed everything. She said she wanted a divorce. The words hung in the air like smoke. My parents were sitting right there, 10 feet away, hearing my wife scream about how much she hated them and how she wanted to end our marriage. Sarah's hand was shaking. David looked like someone had punched him in the gut. For a second, nobody moved. I think everyone expected me to start arguing, to defend them, to beg Olivia to calm down and talk about this privately. But something in me just clicked. I'd spent 2 years making excuses for her behavior. 2 years trying to keep the peace. 2 years walking on eggshells and hoping she'd change. And in that moment, watching my parents' hurt faces, I realized I was done. I didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't even raise my voice. I just looked at Olivia and said, "Okay." She blinked, clearly not expecting that response. She asked me what I meant, and I told her we'd start the divorce right now. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and found Mr. Davies' number. I'd gotten it 6 months ago during a particularly bad fight, thinking we might need couples counseling or something worse. Never thought I'd actually use it. I hit dial and put it on speaker right there at the dinner table. Olivia's eyes went wide, and she asked what I was doing, her voice suddenly uncertain instead of angry. The phone rang twice before Mr. Davies picked up. I told him it was a weird time to call, but I needed to start divorce proceedings. That my wife just told me she wanted a divorce in front of witnesses, and I was ready to file. My lawyer, to his credit, didn't miss a beat. He said he could have papers ready by Monday, and asked if I wanted to come in tomorrow to start the paperwork. That's when Olivia's face changed completely. The anger drained away and was replaced by pure shock. She stammered that she didn't mean it like that. Tried to reach for my phone. I pulled it away and told Mr. Davies that Monday worked, that I'd be there first thing. I hung up and looked at Olivia, who was now standing there with tears starting to form in her eyes. Sarah and David hadn't moved, hadn't said a word. David slowly set down his wine glass, and Sarah stared at her plate. The silence was deafening. Olivia started backtracking immediately, saying she was just upset, that she didn't actually mean divorce, that I couldn't just take her seriously like that. But I was already standing up, already done. I told her she'd said it in front of my parents, screamed it at a family dinner, and asked why I wouldn't take her seriously. I turned to Sarah and David and apologized that they had to hear that. Told them they should probably go. David nodded, already helping Sarah up from her chair. She was crying now, quiet tears running down her face. They gathered their things without a word, and I walked them to the door. Sarah hugged me tight and whispered that they loved me before they left. When I came back inside, Olivia was sitting at the table, surrounded by cold food and broken family dinner dreams. She looked up at me with red eyes and asked if I was really doing this. I grabbed my keys and my wallet and told her she'd said she wanted a divorce, and I was just giving her what she asked for. And then I left, drove to a hotel across town, and slept better than I had in months. She thought I'd beg, thought I'd fight, thought I'd do anything to save our marriage. But the truth is, she killed it herself the moment she disrespected my family to their faces. Some things you can't take back, and some lines you can't uncross. I lay in that hotel bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the whole dinner in my head. Part of me couldn't believe I'd actually done it, that I called my lawyer right there in front of everyone. But another part of me, the part that had been slowly dying for 2 years, felt relief. My phone was blowing up with texts from Olivia, everything from apologies to accusations, but I didn't respond. I turned off my phone and went to sleep. Monday morning, I was in Mr. Davies' office in Phoenix at 9 sharp, ready to move forward. He went over everything, explained the process, told me what to expect. The whole time, I kept waiting to feel something, regret, maybe, or panic, but mostly I just felt numb. He asked if I was sure, and I told him about the dinner, about my parents' faces, about 2 years of walking on eggshells. He nodded and said he'd seen cases like this before, that sometimes people show you exactly who they are, and you just have to believe them. The paperwork was started that day. He said it would take a few months to finalize, but we could get the ball rolling immediately. I signed what I needed to sign and left his office feeling lighter than I had in years. That feeling lasted about 3 hours until my phone started ringing. Olivia called 17 times that Monday alone. I didn't pick up. She left voicemails that ranged from crying apologies to screaming about how I was overreacting. She texted that she'd made a mistake, that she was stressed, that she didn't mean any of it. Then the texts got angry, saying I was abandoning her over one bad night, that I was being cruel and heartless. I forwarded everything to Mr. Davies and kept my responses minimal. Tuesday, she showed up at my office. Security called me and asked if I wanted them to send her away, but I figured I'd have to face her eventually. We talked in the parking lot, and she looked terrible, like she hadn't slept since Sunday. She begged me to reconsider, said we could go to counseling, that she'd apologize to my parents, that she'd do whatever it took. I asked her if she remembered what she'd said at dinner, and she said yes, but that she was just angry and didn't mean it. I told her that's the problem, that when you're angry, you say what you really think. And what she really thought was that she hated my family and wanted out of our marriage. She didn't have an answer for that. By Wednesday, her family got involved. Her mom, Brenda, called me crying, saying I was breaking her daughter's heart over a simple argument. I reminded her that her daughter had screamed about wanting a divorce in front of my parents, and then I hung up. Her sister, Chloe, sent me a long text about how marriages require forgiveness and I was being immature. I blocked her number. Her dad, Robert, tried a different approach, called and said he understood I was hurt, but that his daughter loved me and we should try to work it out. I respected him more than the others, but I still said no. The thing that surprised me most was how quickly Olivia's narrative changed once she realized I wasn't backing down. Suddenly, I was the villain. She told her friends I'd blindsided her, that I'd been planning to leave for months and used one argument as an excuse. She conveniently left out the part where she'd screamed about hating my family at a dinner table. Some of our mutual friends reached out to get my side, and I told them the truth. Most of them went quiet after that. A few, like Mark, said they'd suspected something was off with Olivia for a while, that she'd made comments about my family before that made them uncomfortable. Mark even told me Olivia had complained at a party 6 months ago that my parents were too involved, which was insane because they'd visited once that entire year. The papers were served to Olivia 2 weeks after that dinner. Mr. Davies' paralegal delivered them to our home in Phoenix while I was at work. Olivia called me immediately, hysterical, saying she couldn't believe I was actually going through with it. She said seeing the official papers made it real, and she wasn't ready to give up on us. I told her I'd given up on us the moment she disrespected my parents to their faces. That weekend, Olivia showed up at Sarah and David's house. Sarah called me after, said Olivia had been crying on their doorstep for 20 minutes, begging them to convince me to stop the divorce. Sarah said she'd been polite but firm. Told Olivia that what she'd said at dinner was unforgivable, and that they supported my decision completely. David apparently stood behind Sarah the whole time. Didn't say a word, just stood there as backup. Olivia left after that, and according to Sarah, she looked devastated. Part of me felt bad, but a bigger part of me remembered Sarah's face at that dinner table, the way her hands shook, the quiet tears. Olivia had hurt the 2 people who'd given me everything and expected me to just get over it. The divorce process dragged on because Olivia kept trying to delay things. She'd miss meetings with her lawyer, wouldn't respond to documents, kept asking for extensions. Mr. Davies said this was normal, that some people think if they stall long enough, the other person will change their mind. But I wasn't changing my mind. We had to divide assets, and that's when things got really messy. Our house was in my name because I'd bought it a year before we got married. She tried to claim she'd contributed to the mortgage, but I had bank records showing I'd paid everything. We had 2 cars, one was hers from before the marriage, and one we'd bought together 2 years ago. My lawyer said the fair thing was for each of us to keep our own vehicles. Olivia wanted the newer car, even though she'd driven the older one. We went back and forth for weeks until finally her lawyer convinced her to be reasonable. We didn't have kids, thank goodness, which made everything simpler. We had a joint savings account that we split 50-50. I didn't fight her on any of the small stuff, the furniture, the kitchen appliances, whatever. I just wanted out. About 6 weeks after I filed, I ran into Mark at the local grocery store. He pulled me aside and said he needed to tell me something. Apparently, Olivia had been seeing someone, meeting up with some guy named Jason she knew from college. He said he'd seen them at a restaurant together twice in the past month. I asked if it looked romantic, and he said, "Yeah, definitely." I wasn't even surprised. Part of me wondered if she'd been talking to this guy before the dinner, if maybe that's why she'd been so eager to blow up our marriage. I told Mr. Davies, and he said it didn't really matter for the divorce, but it was good to know. 3 months after that Sunday dinner, Olivia finally signed everything. Her lawyer had apparently told her that dragging it out was just costing her more money and wasn't going to change the outcome. The day I got the call that she'd signed, I took myself out for a steak dinner. Best meal I'd had in years. The divorce was finalized 4 months after that Sunday dinner. I remember the exact moment I got the call from Mr. Davies. I was sitting in my new apartment in Phoenix, and he told me it was done, officially over. I was a free man. I thanked him, hung up, and just sat there for a minute. I thought I'd feel something dramatic, relief or sadness or anger. But mostly, I just felt tired. It had been a long 4 months of paperwork and lawyers and dividing up a life we built together. But underneath the exhaustion was something else. Something that felt like peace. The first few weeks after the divorce was final were strange. I had to relearn how to be alone. How to make decisions without considering someone else. How to come home to a quiet apartment without tension hanging in the air. I started going to the gym regularly, something I'd stopped doing during my marriage because Olivia always complained when I spent time away. I reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with over the years, guys from college who'd slowly disappeared from my life because Olivia didn't like them or made plans difficult. Turns out when you're not constantly managing someone else's emotions, you have a lot more energy for yourself. Sarah and David came to visit about 6 weeks after everything was finalized. They'd been checking in regularly but hadn't pushed to see me, giving me space to process everything. When they arrived, we had dinner at my apartment. Nothing fancy, just takeout and beer. Sarah kept looking around like she was making sure I was really okay. And David asked if I needed anything, if there was anything they could do. I told them I was good, better than I'd been in a long time. We talked about the divorce, about the dinner, about everything that had happened. Sarah said she'd never liked how Olivia treated me, but hadn't wanted to interfere. David said he'd noticed things over the years, little comments and behaviors that seemed off, but figured it wasn't his place to say anything. I appreciated that they'd respected my choices, even when they disagreed with them. Before they left, Sarah hugged me and said she was proud of me for knowing my worth. That hit harder than I expected. The weird thing about divorce is that life just keeps going. Olivia moved on fast, at least according to social media. Jason, the guy from college she'd been seeing, became her official boyfriend about 2 months after our divorce was done. I heard through friends that she was telling people she was happier than ever, that leaving me was the best decision she'd made. I didn't care. Let her rewrite history if it made her feel better. I saw her one more time about 8 months after the divorce. I was at the local grocery store in Phoenix, the same one where Mark had told me about her new relationship, and she was in the produce section. She looked different, thinner maybe, or just tired. She saw me before I could turn around and walk the other way. She came up to me and asked if we could talk. I said, sure. Kept my tone neutral. Didn't want to make a scene in the middle of the store. She said she'd been thinking about me, about us, about how things ended. She said her new relationship hadn't worked out, that Jason turned out to be controlling and demanding. She said her sister Chloe wasn't talking to her anymore because apparently Chloe blamed her for ruining a good marriage, which was ironic considering Chloe had been the one encouraging her to stand up to my family in the first place. She looked at me with these sad eyes and asked if I ever thought about what could have been, if we could have fixed things. I told her no, I didn't think about it. That she'd made her choice at that dinner table and I'd respected it. She started crying then, right there next to the apples, saying she'd made a mistake, that she'd been confused and angry and didn't know what she was doing. I handed her a tissue from my pocket and told her I hoped she figured things out, but that we were done. She asked if there was any chance, any possibility that we could try again, start fresh. I looked at her and remembered Sarah and David's faces at that dinner. Remembered 2 years of walking on eggshells. Remembered how light I'd felt the day the divorce was finalized. I said no. She nodded like she'd expected that answer and walked away. I finished my shopping and went home. A few months later, almost a year after the divorce, I met Sophia at a work conference. We started talking, exchanged numbers, went out for coffee a few times. It was casual, easy, none of the drama or tension I'd lived with for years. She asked about Olivia once, and I gave her the short version, that my ex had some issues with my family and we'd ended things. She didn't push for details, and I appreciated that. We've been seeing each other for a few months now, and it's good. I'm not rushing into anything, taking my time, making sure I'm doing this for the right reasons. Looking back on everything, I don't regret calling my lawyer that night. People ask me sometimes if I think I overreacted, if maybe I should have tried counseling or given her another chance. But here's the thing. Olivia showed me exactly who she was when she screamed at my parents. She showed me that when things got hard, she'd tear down the people I loved most. That's not something you can fix in counseling. Some people believe love means staying no matter what, but I learned that loving yourself means knowing when to walk away. Olivia wanted a divorce that night, even if she later tried to deny it. And I just had the courage to give her exactly what she asked for. It was the best decision I ever made. What would you have done in my shoes?